Hi everybody, I thought I'd jump on and show you a quick video on how I made this card today. We were challenged by Monica, my Stampin' Up team leader, to pick 3 of the new in colours. So these are the ones I picked, Just Jade, Magenta Madness and the Bumblebee. And we're going to create this card using a couple of different techniques. Firstly, I'm going to open the Magenta Madness and the Bumblebee, and we're going to create a background. This card is a standard 10.5 centimeters by 14.5 centimeters card base, just folded in half. Now I'm going to use these brushes that I got online, but you can use a sponge brayer or just a piece of sponge to do this technique as well. I'm just going to start off by getting some ink. Make sure they're clean before you start because you don't want to mix the colours. I'm going to start off by getting some Magenta Madness on your brush, and then just gonna swirl and build up a bit of colour straight onto the card base. You can do this in patches, and we are gonna mix the two together. They blend really well. I'm going to take the Bumblebee and then fill in the gaps that you've left for, and see how they blend really nicely. And just keep adding a bit more until you get the colour that you want. You could go for a really soft look, or as I'm going here, I'm going for quite a bold, strong, vivid colour. And then any patches, just go back over and fill in again. Doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to be covering this with a mask anyways, just to give you that nice colourful background. These inks are Stampin' Up inks and they dry really quickly, so no need to put a heat gun or anything like that on them. There we go. So that's those two colours, the Bumblebee and the Magenta Madness. We're just going to give it a bit of a wave. It should dry pretty quick. Yeah, nothing coming off that. And then what we're going to do is take a mask. You can do this in any pattern that you like, but I really like this swirly one. And then I'm going to take a sponge dauber, fingered dauber, and then I'm going to use some white ink. If you haven't got white ink, you could probably use a smaller amount of white paint, but it will take longer to dry. So you just want to load the dauber up, place your mask where you want it. You can stick this down with some tape on either side if it's easier to keep in place. I just hold mine. You do get messier if you hold it, but that's fine. And then just dab. I dab rather than rub, because if you rub you get these streaks, and I don't particularly like that effect. So, and I found that with this one I loaded the dauber too much, so I've got these patches here that have bled out of the mask. So I'm just going to do it a bit lighter and build it up on this one. It might take a little while, but it's worth it for the effect. I'll speed this bit up so you haven't got to watch me. So it gives a really nice, simple, subtle effect. Not too overpowering, it just gives a really nice layer of texture to the card. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is make the outside frame, which is just from Whisper White cardstock. So I took a piece of cardstock that is 9.5 centimetres by 13 centimetres, and what I'm going to do is just cut the inside of it with my trimmer just to get that bit of border. I'm going to leave this base dry off a little bit because the Whisper White ink does take a little bit longer to dry for some reason, I'm not sure why. So I'm going to do this by eye. If you really want to, you can put some little pencil marks in to mark off the border, but it is just a half a centimetre, just check, a 1 centimetre border. So I'm going to make this pop out with a, I'm going to use the new foam adhesive sheet so I can cut strips to the sizes that I want. If you haven't got those, what I usually use are the edges of the foam pads. So I just take that off and cut it to size to what I want. So I'll put one of those on just to show you. And then I like to use all of the products that I've got. No point putting those bits in the bin when they can be put to good use. But these foam sheets are really good. So good for doing alphabets, or if you want to die cut something that is maybe a little bit trickier if you put it on straight away. Okay, so this should be pretty dry by now. If not, I just give it a rub just to take the top layer of ink off. Go. And then what we're going to do next is stamp and colour our flower. So for this I used the Floral Essence stamp set, and I used the big flower so I could colour it in myself. I'm going to stamp directly with the magenta ink rather than have a black outline. And then it'll look like one solid flower. There we go. And then what I do is take the pad and give it a good squeeze. So you're making the lid touch the inside of the pad. So it gives you a good little palette of colour to work with. And then taking an aqua brush with some water in, you can squeeze a little bit of water in, only a drop, just to give you, loosen that ink up a little bit, and then it gives you a nice pool of colour to work with. If you want it a lighter colour, you can obviously put a bit more water and dilute it a bit more, but and then I can just test the colour. And then what I do is I always do the dark bits first, because it's always going to be the strongest colour when you first put it on. And then you're just painting in. These stamp sets are really good because you can just follow the lines. You don't have to be an expert. I'm not an artist by any means. All I do is follow the lines. And every flower is different anyway. I don't think it has to be perfect. It just gives you a little bit of definition. If you've got pens or pencils, you can do this with those as well. And just building up. So now I'm just going to put another drop in. I'm just going to make that colour a little bit lighter. So this should dry pretty quick as well. You don't want to put too much water on your brush, because then your paper will start to go a bit soggy and warp a little bit. And then what I do is just take the light colour and just wash it over. Again, I'm not being fussy, it doesn't matter about the edges because I'm going to be cutting it out anyway. And I kind of want it to look like it's watercoloured. There we go. And you can go back over it if you want to. There we go. And then I just want to clean the brush off. And all I do, sorry about the camera, is just get a wet wipe, put the water on, just keep brushing it out on the wet wipe until your brushing is clear before you go on to another colour, because you don't want to mix your colours too much. And then if there's loads of water in here, I just give it a wipe. If you're just using it, if it's just like this, just the ink, then I just leave it in there. It's fine, you can use it next time then. But if it's really watery, I wipe it off, because otherwise it'll go on the ink pad, because the inks pads sit quite close to the lids. So I'm going to just do the centre for the flower, and I'm just going to speed this up. Okay, now our flower's done, and it's more or less dry actually. You don't really need to leave it. If you want to give it a blast with the heat gun, go ahead, but you know, we haven't put too much water on this, so it's not even seeping through the back very much. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out around the outside. I'm not a huge fan of fussy cutting, but something like this isn't actually that detailed. It's fine. I'd rather a punch or die, but hey ho, we can't have them for everything, can we? In the corner there. While I'm getting messy and I've got inks out still, I'm going to take a piece of vellum. This one is 9.5, which is the length of the card, by an inch, which is 2.5 centimeters. So 9.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters. Just make sure it sits along your frame nicely, like that. And then I'm gonna get a sentiment to pop by there. So something short and sweet. If you want to do it longer, you could fill it and then put your flowers somewhere else if you like. But I'm gonna just do a small sentiment on the side. Let's have a look. Straight away rather than leaving them. So I'm going to choose Smile. So I'm going to sit that right by there. Again, I do this by eye. If you've got a stamping platform or something like that and you want to do it on there, then go ahead, but I'm quite happy to do everything by eye. So I'm going to take some Versamark clear ink pad. This is one of the best ones you can get for doing embossing. Just going to coat the stamp, excuse me, and then we're going to stamp straight onto the vellum. I use the grid paper lines to try and get as straight as I can. Again, we're not perfect, so. And then we're going to take some white embossing powder and just give it a coat. Now, can you see the outline here? I've got the edge of the stamp because I pressed a bit too hard. So all I do when it's like that is I grab a little paintbrush, a little one, and I'll just take that off because I don't want that line, because as soon as we put the heat tool on it, that's going to start to go white. So I know I said I'm not fussy, but I am fussy about things like that. So just taking that off. Okay, and I'm going to give it heat. There we go. Really quick and easy. And you can see a little bit of that line where I stamped. If you're really unhappy with it, you could do it again, but I don't think it'll show up too badly. Okay. The only thing with using vellum is that it's really hard to stick it without the whatever adhesive you're using showing up. So I'm just going to use a little bit of tape on the edge, because this is the clearest thing that I could find that actually sticks there. There we go. You can see little speckles of the embossing powder, but that's okay. Okay, so now we need the foliage that goes behind, and that's the third colour that I picked, which was the Just Jade. It's a really, really nice green colour. And I'm not gonna stamp with this. I've chosen the coordinating cardstock, as you can see, to cut some foliage, leaves, sprigs and things for the background. So for those, I'm going to use the new Forever Flourishing dies. I love these dies. Look how many are in there. There's so many, but I'm going to go for this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that, and I'll be back. Right, so I've cut the large one out of the Just Jade cardstock. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut. It's a bit big, so I'm going to cut it down, and then these little ones I've cut out a Pretty Peacock. You get 4 of these little ones in the die set, which is really good because you can just cut them all at once rather than having to run it through 4 times. So with this one, I just cut the top off. And just cut the bottom. Just have a play around with where you want them to go. the glue in those little bits down. Just have a play so we can get that smile in there. If you want to, you can put a dimensional into the one side, just so it sits where the frame, level with the frame. There you go. So and then lastly I'm going to put a bit of Wink of Stella just to give it a bit of a sparkle. Last year, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed. You can go away and create something like this yourselves. Thanks for watching.